One of the incredible people behind the We Won't Wait campaign, Natalie Lang, has just spoken at the 2024 Delegates Conference and joins us now.
Thanks, Esther.
Now, you're Director of Education and Capacity Building at the ACTU, so that's the Australian Council of Trade Unions.
Yes.
What does that role involve?
Oh, it's a really exciting role, great privilege to have it actually. So I get to work with unions around what their training and education needs are for their staff and also for their delegates. And at the moment, with the introduction of new delegates' rights, which is a really exciting win that the union movement has had, really developing and delivering delegate training has been the biggest part of that role.
Can you talk about that briefly, the delegates' rights and what that win was and what it means for our delegates? Because HACSU has more than 400 across this state, representing more than 11,000 members.
Yeah. Delegates play, in my opinion, the most important role in any union. They are the rank and file frontline workers who represent their colleagues in that workplace. They're people who've put their hand up to take on that role, and their members have expressed great confidence in them to be their representatives and usually vote and elect those people into the role of delegate. So previously, a lot of delegates did that work completely on volunteer time. So not only is it not a paid role, and they're already volunteering, all of their work and effort, but they're having to take time off work to be able to do that role. And it's a role that actually all the members, the potential members, but also the whole workplace, even the employers, really benefit from having delegates doing that important work. They're often the source of facilitating discussion in the workplace, collecting worker views about what's happening in that workplace, making representations to management, being able to resolve issues locally, being able to help improve that workplace so it's fairer and it's more just. But up until now, a lot of those delegates, would often have to do things like take annual leave to be able to attend union training, to be able to go to a meeting and express views on behalf of the members in that workplace. So fantastic news is union members right across the country have campaigned together and they won a change in the law, which means delegates now have a role that is recognised in the law and they have rights that come with that. Rights to be able to speak to other workers in their workplace, rights to be visible in the workplace, rights to be able to communicate, and also paid time to be able to attend training so that they've got the skills that they need, the confidence that they need to be able to do the best job they can.
What I loved about your speech was you really brought it back to the delegates. These are who the members within each sector go to if there's issues. But even some huge wins that unions have had have been because of these delegates.
Delegates absolutely are the unsung heroes of the union movement. They're also a great source of truth about what's happening in workplaces. And often the people who make decisions about what happens at work, those who are elected into Parliament, they can become quite removed from the realities of working people. And so it's union delegates who speak truth to power, who make the big long journey to Canberra or to state Parliament, who sit down in what are really daunting circumstances. Like, I don't know if you've ever been to Parliament, but, the big marble hall and the echoey hallways and meeting rooms and all the kind of pomp and circumstance that comes with those formalities. And they turn up there often in their uniform, in their union T-shirt. They walk those halls, I love it when a delegate's wearing a Fitbit or one of those step counters, and then they sit down at the end of the day and they go, oh my God, I've done 40,000 steps just running back and forth through the hallways to see everybody. But each meeting they sit down and they tell the honest, real truth about their experience and about the experience of their colleagues and what's happening at work. And you can see on the faces of the decision makers the change that comes when they go, I had no idea it was like that. I had no idea that's what's happening. So the big changes that we're able to achieve as a union movement really come down to the bravery of delegates who do turn up and who do tell their very honest, very real, very raw story about what's happening at work. It brings about great change.
We did speak about, or you spoke about, rather, I'd love to take credit for your speech because it was great, but you spoke about some of those changes that have happened because of delegates. Could we touch on a couple, starting with perhaps the We Won't Wait campaign?
Yeah, that was a really exciting campaign to get to be part of. That was the campaign for paid family and domestic violence leave to become an employment standard. That means it's part of the safety net and every worker is able to have access to that. Doesn't matter if you're on an enterprise agreement or if you're on an award, that you have that underpinning entitlement. So that really came about because of a delegate named Sam, who was a women's service worker in New South Wales, and she was a court advocate for women who were experiencing family and domestic violence. And she was seeing in her work as a practitioner, as an advocate, she was seeing in her work the difference that paid family and domestic violence leave was having for women's journeys through what is quite a complex system and what is a really complex, terrible situation to be in, to be living with, and to be trying to escape and re-establish yourself safely in the community. So Sam saw that where workers had access to paid family and domestic violence leave, usually in a union negotiated enterprise agreement, those workers were often more able to attend court for the court proceedings and charge-related matters. That's about their safety. They were often more able to kind of up sticks and move into a women's refuge for a period to be able to then find safe accommodation. And one day she was supporting a worker who was a trainee who didn't have access to paid family and domestic violence leave. And on that day, that worker received a phone call from their employer and was told that if they didn't return to the workplace, they were going to have their traineeship terminated because they'd exhausted their annual leave, which is what they'd been using up until that point. And Sam was just devastated and said, it's completely unacceptable that in this day and age, a woman's right to safety is dependent on who her employer is. And so Sam and a number of other delegates from many different unions right across the country, they all came together and they planned and they ran this campaign for nearly a decade. They were having activities in workplaces, they were getting employers on board, they were lobbying, they were holding rallies. They really led that campaign for such a long period and changed mind after mind after mind until it really wasn't a controversial point to be bringing up anymore, saying, you know, hey, we think we should have paid family and domestic violence leave. That people understood the issue more. People understood the role that workplaces need to play. They understood that for women to live safely in the community, the dignity and respect of safe and employment is really fundamental to that. So, you know, that none of that would have happened if it weren't for really brave union delegates who kept turning up and kept telling their truth and, you know, kept organising in their workplaces.
Horrific, isn't it, the statistics that I know you touched on in your speech?
So, yeah, 1 in 4 women will experience family, intimate partner or sexual violence in their lifetime. It's even higher amongst amongst particular groups of women. So we know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women have a higher rate of experiencing these forms of violence. Women with disability in particular have a very high rate of experiencing these forms of violence. So it is a widespread issue. But you're right, even though it's so widespread, there has been a lot of stigma attached to it and people making those disclosures, being fearful of making those disclosures, unfortunately even embarrassed, even though it's completely not their fault or their doing. One of the reasons we think it's so important to have paid family and domestic violence leave is, yes, absolutely about the support for the woman when she's experiencing the violence at that time or the man, but also the important role that it can play in primary prevention. Because when workplaces, so we think about how often you spend in your workplace, how many hours you spend in your workplace, often we see our colleagues and we see our manager more than we might even see our own family. So to have this as an active discussion in the workplace, where it sends a really clear message that family and domestic violence, it's not accepted, it's not the fault of the person who's experiencing that violence, that actually makes significant headway into the primary prevention that we need to change attitudes, to change gender stereotypes that we know are the foundation that leads to family and domestic violence.
Yeah. What would be your key message to any delegate listening or watching this and any members that perhaps haven't gone to their delegate to express concerns? What would be your key takeaway, I guess, for this conference?
I think it's that we find so much strength in each other. So often when you're a delegate, people are looking to you and finding strength in you, and you taking on that role of advocating for them, supporting them, sitting next to them through a grievance procedure, speaking up on their behalf. And that can feel like a bit of a lonely job, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming, and sometimes it can feel like that there's just this great responsibility. Being in that room today was just energising for me. We played a game, The Wheel of Revolution, where we spin the wheel, and it's got a whole bunch of different activities that union delegates undertake, and it might be asking someone to sign a petition, attending an enterprise negotiation, it might be reporting back to a meeting of members, it might be voting on a resolution at a union meeting. What was really fun about that is while we were playing the Wheel of Revolution, everyone's going, yes, yes, I've done that one, was the laughter and just the way that people were turning to the side to the person sitting next to them saying, oh, yeah, I remember when you were doing that. Oh, yeah, I remember when I was doing this. What's your story about this? And sharing those stories and going, actually, we're all in this together. I can guarantee you there is no worker who's experiencing an issue that a worker before them hasn't experienced. I can guarantee you that there is no delegate who's experiencing an issue or a challenge that another delegate hasn't experienced before. So actually by coming along to conferences like this, by being in that room together, by having those conversations, we learn from each other, but we also take great heart in, we're not alone, we're not isolated. That's the whole point of union. We are doing this together and taking that great strength from each other.
Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Oh, thanks, Esther. It's been a real pleasure, and it's so nice to get to look at how many incredible wins delegates have. And, when we've got the next challenge that comes up, we know that we can overcome it because we have before.